The lush green wheat seedlings are full of vitality. And when the wind blows through the wheat waves, the refreshing fragrance is even more enchanting. This scene signifies sustenance and hope, and even if it only exists on an electronic screen, it is enough to captivate the heart. After all, this is the rapidly deteriorating ecological environment of space in the year 2267, which has forced the vast majority of humans to flee Earth. Even though massive space stations have been constructed, they cannot accommodate the numerous displaced humans. Fortunately, the provisional government has already discovered the fifth moon of Jupiter can be developed into a pristine new home for humanity, but those fortunate enough to go to Jupiter's fifth moon are either wealthy or noble. For ordinary people, the only opportunity at present is to work and save money on interstellar cargo ships. Dr. Laura, who is anxious and uneasy, is one of them. In his phone's camera lens, there are countless suffering refugees, yet even in such a dire living environment, it is still much better than the plague-ridden Earth. Fortunately, Laura's sister Hannah has already reached Jupiter's fifth moon ahead of her and has secured the position of medical officer on a cargo ship. Laura has already planned that. As soon as she saves enough money on this trip, she will immediately go to reunite with her sister, whom she misses day and night. The massive cargo ship was being loaded with goods as planned. Witnessing this spectacular scene, Laura was very much looking forward to her upcoming journey. Although the round trip would take a full 8 years, the addition of cryogenic sleep technology made it seem not so long. Welcoming the new crew members was Anna, the commander of this cargo mission. Unlike Laura, the other veteran crew members on the ship were already accustomed to the monotonous life on the ship. The stern captain introduced Laura to her colleagues one by one. Yoshida, the ship's system administrator, Wes, the free-spirited ship mechanic, and Boko, the mature and steady crew member. The ship's autopilot system had already been activated. The destination was in the direction of Proxima Centauri, and everything was as usual. The only difference was that due to recent terrorist activities, the temporary human government had assigned marshals to every ship, and Lieutenant Colonel Samuel was the escort for this mission. To quickly help everyone understand his work, Lieutenant Colonel Samuel played a government propaganda video for everyone. It turned out that the terrorist Klaus, who was previously suspected of attacking ships, was still on the run. He continuously spread anti-space station rhetoric, which was undoubtedly extremely absurd in the eyes of humans living in space. Although Laura also harbored fantasies about Earth, if there was no hope for survival, everyone could only choose to leave. Despite the pressure from the terrorists, the ship set out from the space station as planned. The crew followed the scheduled shifts, with each person on duty for 8.5 months, while the rest had to hibernate in the cryopool. The time spent in hibernation was so brief, and in the blink of an eye, it was Laura's turn to take her shift, which was something she looked forward to with great anticipation. The only comfort along the way was the replies from her sister sent from Jupiter's moon, Europa. Because the ship was so far from the new home, it took a long time for her to receive a reply. Although the content was brief, it was one of Laura's few sources of solace. Aside from boxing, she didn't have any entertainment activities, and the limited supply of nutrient solution was completely tasteless. Only the potted plants in the cabin, and the phone, with her sister on the other end, could help her endure the endless long nights on the spaceship. However, for some reason, the power fluctuations on the spaceship had become more frequent recently. Laura also kept hearing some strange noises. Driven by curiosity, she finally decided to check the condition of the spaceship. Laura was quite sure she wasn't hearing things, but just as she was inspecting the cargo hold through the glass door, a sudden figure startled her so much that she turned and ran. But before he could call the officer, the lieutenant colonel had already appeared in front of him. It turned out that the spaceship's system detected an anomaly in the cargo hold and automatically awakened the dormant guard. Although the lieutenant colonel thought he could check the cargo hold first, at Laura's insistence, the two of them followed emergency procedures and awakened the irritable old captain. The cargo hold was not only extremely cold, but according to the data retrieved by the captain, it had been manually opened several times. If this wasn't a system malfunction, then everyone would be in big trouble. The captain, without saying a word, he opened the heavy sealed door. If there were indeed intruders, they must be found. To resolve the situation quickly, the commander instructed everyone to split up. The containers in the cargo hold were stacked layer upon layer, and for now, they all appeared intact. The only anomaly was that Laura noticed the spaceship was not in a fully loaded state. However, before she could continue reporting to her superiors, the daring captain suddenly fell right in front of her, startling the doctor. She hurried down to the lower level to check. It was too cold outside the sealed door, and the injured person needed to leave the area as soon as possible. But for some reason, the sealed door, which required manual operation, was already in the process of closing before the three returned to the cabin. Fortunately, the electric panel on the ground bought the crew a few seconds, allowing them to escape. However, even so, the severely injured captain did not survive the recent fall. The captain's mysterious death left the crew feeling deeply uneasy. Could it really be, as the government reported, that terrorists attacked the spaceship? In any case, everyone needed to pull themselves together. Under Anna's instructions, everyone immediately got busy. Although conducting autopsies is Laura's job, she never expected to witness a death on the spaceship. According to the scan results, the captain had multiple rib fractures and some skull damage. It seems his direct cause of death was indeed a high-altitude fall. However, the meticulous Laura also noticed a peculiar visual residue in the captain's eyes. This might provide a clue for solving the case. She removed the captain's eyeball and, together with the lieutenant colonel, examined the images within. The victim seemed to have encountered an unexpected situation while inspecting the biochemical cargo. Both of them, who initially thought the spaceship was only transporting construction materials, were shocked by what the captain saw before his death. Vess and Boko passed through the maintenance airlock and returned to the scene of the incident. There must be more to the captain's death, and with the captain's access, they managed to enter the biochemical cargo hold. Trusting her instincts, Laura wiped away the frost on one of the cargo boxes. Not only was there a little girl in front of them, but all the cargo boxes contained living people. The lieutenant colonel quickly called over the ship workers who were doing maintenance. The people moving the cargo boxes couldn't understand why they were transporting living people this way. Perhaps this complaint angered someone in the shadows, as the corridor of the cargo hold suddenly initiated a closing procedure, and Laura, unable to dodge in time, nearly fell to her death like the previous captain. Fortunately, thanks to her daily exercise, she was physically strong and managed to climb up in front of the lieutenant colonel, unlike the excited crew members. Anna expressed her dissatisfaction with the crew's behavior of stirring up the cargo, but Laura, being a doctor, insisted on giving the girl a medical examination. The dedicated lieutenant colonel also supported investigating the anomalies on the spaceship, and the minority yielded to the majority. Anna eventually agreed to the group's request to keep the little girl, but despite her outward agreement, she still harbored dissatisfaction. She approached Yoshida, who was in charge of the maintenance system, to investigate the peculiar lieutenant colonel. After all, by convention, the security officer should side with the commander, not the lieutenant colonel who is keen on investigating cases. It must be more than just dedication. Meanwhile, Laura and the officer, who were examining the little girl, also made some progress. The girl was merely unconscious with no major injuries, but the data on the cargo box had been encrypted, taking a few minutes to open. While waiting, Laura couldn't help but become curious about the destination of this mission, according to Lieutenant Colonel Ann's explanation. The space station in the direction of Proxima Centauri is officially defined as a transportation hub, but on an unofficial level, it holds a more special status. Before the Lieutenant Colonel could continue speaking, the sound of a successful decryption caught Laura's attention. Taking this opportunity, Xiao immediately leaned over and kissed the doctor, but the brief sweetness couldn't mask the anxiety in their hearts. Facing the little girl sleeping in the cabin, both of them felt an inexplicable sadness. After further scanning, Laura discovered that although the girl was not in any immediate danger, there was an inorganic substance growing inside her body. It seemed to be a virtual reality device. The Lieutenant Colonel, having a sudden idea, immediately suggested that the doctor use neural interfacing technology to view the girl's experiences before she fell into a coma. However, Laura, adhering to her professional ethics, was unwilling to risk the girl's health, and the rejected Lieutenant Colonel had no choice but to remind Laura not to let the other crew members know about their new discovery. The events recorded in Laura's footage were becoming increasingly bizarre, deepening her suspicions about this voyage. If it weren't for the vast distance hindering information transmission, she would have loved to recount her strange encounters to Hannah. Laura promised her sister on camera that she would detail these encounters once they reached Jupiter's moon, Europa, but, to her surprise, this time she received a reply almost immediately. Based on the girl her sister mentioned, it was clear that the response was to the message she had just sent. Noticing something unusual, Laura's expression changed dramatically, and she immediately recalled the Lieutenant Colonel's previous warnings to her. Why did he forbid her from leaking the message? Why could the Lieutenant Colonel, as a trained officer, recognize the virtual reality device at a glance? She couldn't help but question who the mysterious Samuel really was. Yet the response from the other side was still a meaningful kiss. The spaceship continued to sail into deep space, and the situation on board rapidly developed amidst the various competitions. Under Yoshida's investigation, Anna discovered that a crew member had altered the log files in the hibernation pod while in hibernation, and this person was none other than the Lieutenant Colonel she had long suspected. The Marshal's response to Pong was that he had the duty to wake up periodically for inspections. However, in the commander's eyes, the other party was simply feeling guilty for his misdeeds, and he quickly drew the gun he had prepared in advance. But before he could relish his advantage for long, the agile lieutenant colonel managed to turn the situation around. But in the cabin, there was more than one gun pointed at him. With the crew's cooperation, Anna still managed to capture the lieutenant colonel. Fortunately, what Samir had said earlier served as a reminder to the doctor. Laura did not want to follow the commander's orders to send the girl back to the cargo hold. Moreover, he also had to treat the wounds of the injured police officer. When the tied-up lieutenant colonel was alone with his lover again, there was already a hint of farewell in his eyes. Worried that this might be the last time they see each other, he finally revealed the secret in his heart. In fact, the destination of this spaceship was the so-called Europa. But before he could explain further, the crew members rushed in and took him to the freezing chamber, as Yoshida discovered the lieutenant colonel's unusual behavior. Looking at Samuel in the pool, his mindset gradually became complex. He accepted the doctor's request to investigate, not just for others, but because he himself was very eager to know whether the spaceship's destination was indeed Proxima Centauri. His deep-seated suspicion was not unfounded. As a systems engineer, he had already become suspicious during the journey. Although the spaceship's destination coordinates were encrypted, he could confidently tell Laura that our destination is not Proxima Centauri. Moreover, this coordinate had been set long before departure. This means that the deviation in the destination has nothing to do with the lieutenant colonel. Upon hearing this, Laura also reported her findings to Yoshida. According to Samuel, their real destination was actually Jupiter's moon, Callisto. Furthermore, whereas it used to take a long time for him to receive a reply from his sister, the interval for checking messages recently was less than 20 minutes. However, regardless, these are just speculations and suspicions. With the interruptions from the crew, they can only temporarily conceal the information. The reclusive Nishida doesn't enjoy socializing with the rough men at the table, and a high-earning doctor wouldn't stay on the spaceship for long. If possible, they would also like to emigrate to Callisto, perhaps because the outspoken remarks were too shocking. Perhaps wanting to continue uncovering the spaceship's secrets, Laura quickly took the opportunity of delivering tea to get up and look for the solitary Dr. Yoshida. To her utter surprise, the once lively Yoshida had suddenly become the second victim on the spaceship. Moreover, the lieutenant colonel, who had been frozen in the pool, also disappeared at this time. Someone must have helped him escape. The atmosphere inside the cabin became tense once again. Under Anna's coordination, the fully armed group began searching for the fugitive terrorist Weiss. The team, which included Laura, was the first to notice something unusual in the lower deck. However, searching for someone in the maze of interconnected pipes is not that easy. The doctor, caught off guard, was pinned down by a strange person who attacked from behind. Fortunately, a bullet fired from the shadows saved the doctor, who couldn't break free. The last words left by this bearded villain before his death were to blow up something. Laura looked at the slain criminal and found him increasingly familiar. It seems this man was indeed the terrorist who had always advocated for returning to Earth. By going through the photos and phone he left behind, Laura was quite certain. Samuel, like Klaus, was actually an Earthist who refused to give up on their homeland. It seems the temporary human government indeed deceived them. With a little treatment, various crops could still be grown on Earth, and it was entirely possible to survive. Now Laura could finally understand Samuel's desperate resistance. This man was not a terrorist, but a defender of the truth. Just as he proclaimed to everyone, the so-called new home on Europa was nothing more than a scam by the temporary government, and those sent to Europa all lived in a virtual world spaceship created by the government. The reason for transporting so many humans was to provide neural units for the creation of the virtual world. Their brains had become the blueprint for the temporary government's web of lies. Klaus had already lost his mind in the struggle, and the crew members were not killed by Samuel. Upon hearing this, Anna, though slightly guilty, still refuted with a so-called phone reply. However, the speaker was intentional, and the listeners were equally intentional in their appearance. The crew members who followed the commander's orders actually understood that Anna was deceiving everyone, but Laura's speed in drawing her gun was too slow. Before she could control the commander, her hands were already tied. Although Anna realized she had been exposed, she still maintained a righteous demeanor. Even if the colonization plan for Saturn's moon Titan V ended in a disastrous failure, and everyone lived in a virtual world, the provisional government believed that only by having a better future awaiting them could they bring confidence and hope to humanity. Moreover, the virtual world constructed by the government was so perfect that ordinary people could not find any flaws. and he would not allow anyone to undermine the government's good intentions. Neither the doctor nor the train police would live to see tomorrow. However, the commander was happy too soon. The crew would no longer accept the government's deception. He, who was frightened into the cryogenic chamber, should reflect on his sins in the darkness. But even if they understood that Titan V was just a simulation, Weiss also did not want to remain in the dark and sunless spaceship. But regardless, at least the remaining crew members were deeply interested in Jupiter's moon, Europa. No matter what the new world in their imagination looked like, Laura wanted to see her sister, and Samuel wanted to carry on Klaus's legacy by destroying the antenna set up by the provisional government to prevent the signals emitted by the virtual machine from continuing to deceive humans outside the new cotton warehouse. If Laura could send a warning from home before then, it could shatter people's illusions about the unfulfilled promise of Ebony. This was undoubtedly an ironic picture, that legendary beautiful homeland. Since it was merely a suspended dormancy base floating in the air, the truly habitable home was actually Earth, where the ecology was gradually recovering. The cargo spaceship arrived at the base as scheduled, and all delivery procedures proceeded as usual. The audacious interim government would not notice anything unusual about the spaceship for the time being. Bidding farewell to the girl, Laura followed Samuel's footsteps and flew towards the vast dormancy base according to the original plan. However, floating in space, they were unaware that Wes, who was eager to head to the virtual world, had startled the dormant Anna to obtain the commander's ID badge. She and Burke manually altered the spaceship's transfer procedures. As a result, the docking time of the spaceship would be significantly shortened, allowing them to board the sleep pods inside the ship before the entire cargo was unloaded, and thereby reach the new virtual homeland, experiencing the hope lingering in their minds. However, this would mean that Samuel, who was installing the bomb, and Laura, who was searching for her sister, would lose a significant amount of valuable action time. To make matters worse, the thruster on Laura's spacesuit malfunctioned at this moment. Fortunately, Samuel was not far away, and he managed to bring Laura to the cabin where Hannah was, reuniting her with the sister she had longed to see, who was indeed alive. Only one interface is needed. Laura could see her sister, who lived on the screen through the simulated signal. It was at this moment that the two noticed the anomaly of the ship unloading its cargo ahead of schedule. Laura now had only 7 minutes. 7 minutes to resolve everything. Laura, connected to the simulated signal, witnessed a rapidly changing scene. In just a few seconds, she saw the morning glow and evening dusk, with a myriad of atmospheric changes. Anna was right. The virtual scenes constructed by the government could indeed pass for reality. Whether it was the withered leaves in her hand, or the breeze in the forest, everything seemed like the real world. Following the scenes from her memory, the doctor found her sister in the forest courtyard, just as she appeared in the video message. Carefree and living in comfort, yet the more beautiful the scene before her, the more sorrowful it appeared to Laura. None of this was real. It was merely an illusion crafted by the government. As he ran away with all his might, his vision gradually blurred. He was about to return to the real world, a reality that, no matter how bad, was better than the illusion. He seized the last opportunity to broadcast his message within the illusion. Because 5 is not a paradise, we have all been betrayed by the government. Everything about the new world is a lie. This is the last message from Jupiter's moon, Europa. We have no new home, but we still have our own Earth. With that, Laura was immediately transported back to reality. Reality is vivid and harsh. Although they were about to achieve their respective goals, Laura's damaged spacesuit meant that only one of them, between her and Samuel, could make it to the returning spaceship. And Samuel's choice was to let Laura take the girl back. The hero in Laura's eyes vanished into the vast cosmos like this, under the sacrifice of her beloved. The doctor managed to return to the spaceship, and the bomb on the signal tower was detonated as scheduled. The provisional government could no longer deceive humanity, but there were always those who wanted to make a last-ditch stand. However, this time, Laura would never let the government's henchmen succeed again. The future of humanity always lies with those who hold on to hope, and humanity's hope always lies in the reality within reach, the end.